Well, good morning. Good morning. If I haven't met you before, my name is Mike. If I have, then my name is still Mike. That joke still works. And a big welcome if you're watching online as well. It's fantastic to be with you. So as we mentioned before, my name is Mike Harris. I'm currently the pastor at All Nations Baptist Church from down south. So my guys bring greetings to you. It's with their blessing that I'm here this morning with you all in my home church that I grew up in, which is wonderful to be back. We're having a wonderful season at All Nations that's supporting us, which is fantastic. But just some of the learning that we're doing together, myself as well as the church, I hope that's going to come out this morning. A lot of this stuff that we're wrestling with at All Nations is actually what we're kind of going to look at today. And as well, for those who know a bit of my journey as well, with the accreditation, I've actually finished it. So I was accredited and ordained at the start of this year, and I really appreciate all of those of you who have supported me through that journey and those who were able to be there at my ordination service earlier in the year. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you this morning. Well, I've got a bit of a casual interest in architecture. I really enjoy seeing the way that materials can inspire awe. From ancient stone-carved, hand-painted traditional churches built centuries ago to the boxy architecture and artistry in our modern homes today. And it's on my bucket list to get over to Europe to experience these historic traditional churches in person. I know some of you might have had the chance to go over and see them and may even have some holiday snaps you could show me, but I don't think it's quite the same. A picture doesn't do it justice. You've got to be there. Those ancient building structures can be intimidating. It can be breathtaking, capturing the best way that ancient architects could depict the bigness of God. Walking inside, you are swallowed by the beauty. Massive, thick stone walls surrounding you, rich wooden paneling and artworks adorning the walls and the ceilings, depicting the artist's view of God. And often these buildings have magnificent stained glass windows designed so that the reflecting light illuminates the whole space. In its fullness, it's intended to create a profound sense of wonder and awe, pointing you far beyond the artwork itself. But it isn't too long before I begin to see a design flaw in these buildings when I hold the architecture up alongside who the church was actually created to be. You see, when Jesus was asked what the most important commandment was, he responded by quoting from Deuteronomy. So we're reading from Mark chapter 12, verse 29. The most important one, asks Jesus, is this: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength." And by quoting Deuteronomy, Jesus is highlighting the continuation of a historic faith. Hear, O Israel. That is a community of people, a nation. Our relationship with God is inherently communal. It's not an individualistic relationship we've now moved into with our own personal flavor of Jesus. It is the one God calling a whole community to himself, asking for their complete love, just as he, as we've already shared, has lavished it on us. And immediately following this, he adds, the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Now, if we hang our church practice on these commands, and which is so central to RBC's mission statement, let me remind you of loving God, loving people, and seeing lives change. then of course we're going to recognize that the church is the people, not the building. But what disappoints me about these churches with these ornate buildings, or dare I say even our modern churches, the highly functional ones, is the windows. Stained glass is beautiful when the light shines through it. But the world, you can't see the outside world through them. And the outside world cannot see in. A modern equivalent might be heavy tinting or shuttered windows. It inadvertently creates a visual barrier that says what happens inside this room is separate from what happens out there. Or to the person on the street that walks past, what happens in there is holy, and I could never be a part of that. I could never step foot into that place because I'm not like that. It is so easy for our faith to end up inside a beautiful container. These four walls can become a happy place that we love and look forward to going to on a Sunday, where we meet with God in worship like we've already been doing this morning, where we enjoy fellowship with one another and pray, God, may your kingdom come in this place in Ross Trevor as it is in heaven. And don't get me wrong, these are vital and wonderful things. But meanwhile, the light we are supposed to shine stays trapped inside. You see, Jesus called us to be the light of the world, to join him in a city on a hill, salt of the earth kind of mission. And when someone tried to narrow this command and asked Jesus, so who are these actual neighbours we're supposed to be looking after and loving? Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan, a story where the true neighbour was the one who crossed the road, the one who crossed cultural boundaries and went beyond what was comfortable for them in order to show mercy. And I'm reminded and challenged about how easy it is for us to talk in our worship gathering about loving our neighbours without ever really meeting them. We pray for our community and hope people come through the doors, but if we're honest, we often don't know who they are. We don't know what they care about or what keeps them awake at night. And that's because crossing the road takes effort, doesn't it? Crossing cultural boundaries takes a willingness to learn and be sensitive. Offering practical care to those who need it takes time. It takes patience. It might cost us a little bit of money and our resources. But when we do this, we crack open that stained glass. We blur the lines between church and our surrounding community, taking on the responsibilities of a good neighbour, and declare that this building is not a destination where we hide, but a launching pad into the messy, beautiful reality of our neighbourhood, joining God on his mission. But why is this so important? Why do I come here and be all passionate about this morning, you might ask? If you look at how Mark records the rest of this conversation, this is a conversation Jesus is having with someone. Hopefully we'll see the challenge. After Jesus speaks these commandments, a man replies, "Well said, teacher. You are right in saying that God is one, and there is no one other but him. To love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, and with all your strength, and to love your neighbour as yourself is more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices." Jesus saw that he'd answered wisely and simply recognized the truth to the love of God and the love of our neighbour outweighs ritual, it outweighs programs, and it outweighs our offerings. Loving God and loving our neighbour are the most important callings in our life. So here's the question for us today. If Jesus says that the heart of faith is loving God and loving our neighbour in real, visible, practical ways, and that's more important than anything else we might do, what does that look like for us as a church? This group of people. How can we see this church as a neighbour? We know, as we've said before, the church is a gathering of believers. You choose to be part of RBC because you feel a sense of family and belonging here, don't you? We come to worship together, to encourage one another, and to do life alongside each other. But this building sits right here in a specific physical neighbourhood, surrounded by homes, businesses and parks where real people live, work and play. People with stories, people with struggles, and people with dreams. God has planted this community here for a reason, and that goes deeper than just the practical reality that we all can't fit in someone's living room. Decades ago, when the faithful few voted to buy this land and move the church here from McGill, I'm convinced that God gave them a much bigger vision than just acquiring more space. They were planting a stake in the spiritual soil of this neighbourhood. So if there's a divine purpose in being planted here, what does that mean for us to be a good neighbour? How can our presence be a blessing to those who live nearby, even if they never walk through these doors? Well, for a long time, the Western Church has relied on an attractional model. The attractional model says we plan excellent programs, run engaging events, put up signs and hope the community comes to us. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, when a church runs targeted, beautiful ministries like Enrich Life, that genuinely meets a need in the community of the vulnerable. The attraction model is actually doing exactly what it's meant to do, creating a safe space for people who need to receive some help. But if we only rely on that attractional model, we run into that stained glass design flaw. We're still asking our neighbourhood to cross the threshold to us, to cross into our world on our terms inside our box. I believe there's another dimension to being the church, one that actually anchors our attractional ministry. It's a model less about attraction and more about incarnation. It's the model of Jesus himself. Just as God didn't wait for us to find our way to him, but came into this world to us, we too are called to step outside our walls to be among our neighbours. John's Gospel says it simply and powerfully. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. In the Message, Eugene Peterson translates this as, the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighbourhood. That's God moving into the streets. He didn't set up a temple and wait for us to not be busy enough to come and see him. He took on human skin, experienced our dust, walked our paths and met us in our vulnerability. So notice the progression Jesus sets. He calls us to love our neighbour personally. Then together as a church calls us to love our neighbour collectively. To be a living, breathing picture of God's presence and compassion right where we are. The ultimate expression of that collective love is incarnation. cracking open the stained glass, stepping out of our happy place and moving into the reality of the streets around us. You see, throughout church history, whenever God has wanted to wake up his people to this kind of incarnational ministry, he's raised up pioneers who refused to let faith stay hidden behind closed doors. And this morning I want to share just two examples to show us exactly what that looks like when the church decides to act like a neighbour. The first of these was a young Methodist lay preacher named William Booth and his wife, Catherine. They began their ministry in the streets of East London in the 1860s. As William walked through the city, he discovered a heartbreaking reality. The people who most desperately needed to experience the love of Jesus were the least likely to ever set foot in a traditional church building. In fact, even if they tried, they were often made to feel completely unwelcome. They were viewed as too dirty, too poor, or too broken. The Booths realized that if the neighborhood couldn't come to the church, then the church had to go out to the neighborhood. They stepped out of the buildings and began gathering the hungry, the homeless, and the hopeless in tents, dance halls, and marketplaces, operating under a gritty, beautiful philosophy: soup, soap, and salvation. William Booth famously noted, "You cannot warm the hearts of people with God's love if they have an empty stomach and cold feet." Before he preached a sermon, he often served a bowl of soup because people with empty stomachs rarely heard sermons well. It was very practical. Love listens before it speaks, and this real practical care could make way for the transformational grace of Jesus, because only he could heal the soul beneath the struggle. But what made their ministry so revolutionary was their conviction that dignity mattered just as much as charity. Catherine Booth understood that true incarnational mission is always done with people, never merely for them. It's about lifting people up rather than looking down on them. Every single person, no matter how trapped in their hardship they may be, is fundamentally made in the image of God. They aren't charity cases to be pitied. They are individuals intrinsically worthy of deep love, respect, and real friendship. When we support ministries like Enriched Life, we're operating in this same kind of lineage. We aren't just handing out resources as a distant charity. We're declaring to our community, we see you, we value you, and we recognize the image of the Creator in you. But let's be honest, when you decide to lift up the broken, things can get a little messy. And this was exactly why the religious leaders of East London in the 1860s preferred just to ignore these people, pretend that they weren't there. And historically, we've often structured church life around orderly buildings and neat, predictable meetings that happen at a particular time because we've got things to do, right? We pack our lives so busy, so we schedule everything in. While that neatness is comfortable for us, it comes at a hidden cost. We inadvertently create spaces where people who don't feel tidy feel like they don't belong. The Booths utterly rejected that tidy religious barrier. They didn't demand that people get their lives together first. They loved them right where they were and let God's grace do the cleaning. The truth is, every single one of us has a whole bunch of stuff that we're trying to hold together. It's just some of us are better at holding it together than others. Take a moment and imagine if everything in your life fell apart tomorrow. How would you feel about walking through these doors? Would you feel safe to do that? Would you feel seen? Would you feel welcomed? Now imagine someone walking into this community who is right in the thick of that exact kind of chaos. A shattered relationship, addiction, a deep grief, or a financial crisis that they didn't see coming. Would they find a space where they could truly belong before they believe? Would they find people who are willing to sit with them in the dirt rather than just standing over them with a mop? If we want people to find the transforming love of Jesus here, we have to be willing to let our church get a little bit messy. Holy messiness isn't a program. It's a community that chooses people over policy and presence over perfection. If you want to know where that radical posture comes from, look at the words of Jesus himself at the end of Matthew 25. He lays out a vision of faith that the Booths took completely literally. And we mentioned it earlier. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. The Booths realize that when we step across the threshold of our church walls to serve the vulnerable, the lonely, and the disadvantaged, we aren't just shining the light of Jesus to them. We're finding Jesus already at work in them. To the Booths, the starving person wasn't a project to be managed. That person was a flesh and blood encounter with the living Christ. When they handed out a hot bowl of soup, they were feeding Jesus. When they offered soap, they were washing Jesus' feet. This, friends, is the ultimate posture of an incarnational neighbor. It completely flips the script. We don't go out into our community from a place of superiority, thinking we have all the answers to fix people's lives. We go out with a holy curiosity and a deep humility, knowing that as we serve the least of these in our local streets, we're stepping into a holy encounter with our King, Jesus. But how do we actually start? How do we connect with people effectively without assuming that we already know what they need? Well, to answer that, we have to look at our second historical guide, William Carey, who showed us that before we can meaningfully speak into our streets, we have to be willing to learn from them. William Carey is remembered as the father of modern missions. But before he ever crossed the ocean, Carey was just an ordinary English shoemaker. Yet as he repaired shoes, his mind and heart refused to stay small. He taught himself Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and French between his leather repairs. I'm pretty sure he knew a few other languages other than that too. Looking at a comfortable and complacent church culture, he argued that if we're truly going to pray for God's kingdom to come on earth, we must become acquainted with the actual state of the world. His core conviction was simple. Mission must begin with learning. Before you can share the gospel with someone, you must understand who they are. And driven by this vision, Carey famously declared, "Expect great things from God, attempt great things for God." And in 1793, he put feet on his faith, stepped onto a ship to India, and never returned. When Carey arrived in India, he didn't approach the culture as an outsider looking to conquer it and tell them what's what and to criticize. Instead, he completely immersed himself in local life. He managed an indigo plantation, worked alongside the locals and set out to understand them from the inside out with a genuine, non-manipulative interest. Carey was simply copying the ultimate model of Jesus. When God entered our world in the incarnation, he didn't just shout instructions from a safe distance. He entered our story, was born into an ordinary working class family. He experienced hunger, felt exhaustion, and wept in the dust at the graveside of his friends. The writer of Hebrews captures this beautifully, reminding us that Jesus was made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Jesus walked in our sandals before he spoke into our lives. He felt the weight of our humanity. And Carey realized that true incarnational neighborliness means walking close enough to the people around us to feel what they feel and learn how they live. Because Carey chose to walk in their sandals, his primary tool wasn't a megaphone. It was a listening heart. He and his team dedicated years to learning the languages, customs, worldviews, and religions of the people they came to serve. Carey mastered the local languages so deeply that he translated the Bible into 36 different Indian languages. He refused to ridicule the beliefs of his neighbors or create unnecessary cultural barriers. He chose to live transparently so that his life could demonstrate Christ's love before his mouth ever spoke a word. If our love doesn't take time to listen first, the Apostle Paul warns us that our most eloquent words are nothing more than a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. We have to earn the right to serve meaningfully by sharing our lives, sharing our tables, and building deep, listening friendships first. So we've covered a lot of ground here this morning, but it all brings us back to this central question. What does it mean for us practically to be church as neighbour? I was at a workshop recently looking at how we form deep, Christ-like relationships. And they shared a simple perspective that helped to illuminate this journey for me. They suggested that when it comes to engaging with people, there are really two primary movements we have to begin with. The first movement is being with. This is exactly what William Carey modelled for us. It's the willingness to step out of our comfortable spaces to sit with a struggling friend or a stranger in need. It means building real relationships, being genuinely curious about people's stories, and learning what they value, what they fear, and what keeps them awake at night. It's about offering someone our presence, not just a program or a handout. The second movement is belonging. This is what William and Catherine Booth championed in the slums. It's the willingness to open our lives and create a safe space for those who are vulnerable, for those who are disadvantaged or carrying a lot of hurt. It's even about making room for those who are different to us. It's asking ourselves, are we willing to allow for a little more messiness in our lives, in our neighborhood, or in our church, so that someone else can feel welcome here? Can someone find a home here at RBC before they have their life sorted out? Can they belong here before they believe? You see, long before any modern workshop gave names to these concepts, God gave this exact same strategy to a group of broken, displaced people living in Babylon. In Jeremiah 29:7, he gave them a command that completely reshaped how they viewed their geography. I've adapted it slightly here for us, for our context right now, but the heartbeat remains the same. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the neighborhood in which I have placed you. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Friends, God did not place this church on this corner just so we could have a cozy place to hide away and keep warm on a Sunday morning. He placed us here to seek the peace and prosperity of our neighbourhood of Rostrevor and the wider city of Campbelltown. He placed his church here so that we could be with the community around us and we could help them to belong with us, whatever that looks like. Because when we commit to these simple relational practices, that is when we will see people come to believe and be transformed by the love of Jesus. But we recognize that Jesus is already at work within people's hearts by his Spirit. Through supporting and being involved in Enrich Life ministry, and even just seeking opportunities to walk alongside people in your own everyday spheres, you are doing the gritty, beautiful work of Jeremiah 29. And we all benefit and prosper when Jesus' church becomes more diverse, when people coming to know him becomes commonplace, and when we get to witness lives truly transformed in his name. So let us be a church that cracks open the stained glass. Let's learn our neighbours' names. Listen to their stories. And look at our streets, not as a mission field to conquer, but as a community to cherish and love. Well, let me pray for us this morning. King Jesus, thank you that you didn't stay at a safe distance, but that you moved into our neighborhood. Thank you that you met us in our mess, gave us a place to belong, and transformed us by your grace. There's not enough words to show gratitude enough for that. We ask that you would give us the courage to crack open the stained glass of our own lives and this church. Send us out from this building today, not as people looking to conquer a mission field, Lord, but as neighbours looking to cherish the community that you placed us in. Grant us the humility to be with the people of Rostrevor and Campbelltown, and the grace to make room and help them to belong. Bless the Enrich Life ministry and use us this week to seek the peace and prosperity of the exact places you have positioned us. Open our eyes to see your face in the vulnerable, and to join you in the beautiful, messy work you are already doing on our streets. In your powerful name we pray. Amen.